jump right into details without, taking the higher look real quick. So, of course, these are air-breathing mammals that share the characteristics, excuse me, of other mammals with being warm-blooded and thermoregulating, being able to maintain their own temperature. They do have hair, believe it or not. Even these little calves have small whiskers. Even dolphins and other species will have hairs and whiskers. Some of them are absorbed again in utero before they're born. In the case of gray whales and some of the larger whale species, the calves will have whiskers, display whiskers, and then they eventually are grown into the skin or rubbed off. And they do breathe air. This is how we get to see them during the migration, right? It's the joy of being able to watch those whales is really, I always kind of chuckle to myself when I think we're going out to watch some whales breathe, if you want to look at it in the simplest of terms. But I will stare at my dog while it's sleeping too. So, there's that. I enjoy the simple things, I guess, and as we all do. But they also do give live birth, and we know that they're mammals. They have mammary glands and they nurse their young. So there's a lot of those things that are those that we have in common with them. And just to look a quick snapshot, if we were to look at gray whales and what makes them special and unique, they may not be the most beautiful, flamboyant whale. They don't have those long pectoral fins of a humpback whale, but I find them gorgeous in so many ways. They have these beautiful, unique patterns on their body. Originally, when I was originally taught, I was taught that those were all barnacle scars, but the calves, we'll see in pictures later that calves have as much coloration and modeling as the adults do, and they really just have a beautiful overall patchwork pigment. They have their baleen that's ivoryish and pale in color, and they're a medium-sized whale, getting 40 to 45 feet long, about the length of a school bus. So if you're teaching school groups, it's always a great way to give them a point of reference. Most kids will still know what a school bus looks like. They do have one of the longest migrations, rivaling that of a humpback whale. Humpback whales also make very, very long migrations as far as mammals are concerned, right? Um, I bet some of you guys can name the longest migration of any animal in the world. You can type it in the chat box or maybe even mention it there in person. But of course, the Arctic tern makes the longest migration of any animal in the world. And they do have these ectoparasites, parasites being a more of an overarching descriptive term. They're not truly parasitic, but they have a species-specific barnacle that lives on them. It's not found on any other species in the world. And 3 species of these whale lice that 2 of which are also species-specific and found nowhere else, on no other animals in the world. So just a quick look. But let's take a look and let's start our focus and moving our way down to those lagoons. Um, I hope that many of you are familiar enough with gray whales that when you hear about gray whales in Baja, you might think of a beautiful moment like this with a cow-calf pair, kind of connecting, imprinting, bonding a bit while they're in this period of nursing and raising their young. Or maybe these exuberant moments when you have tourists visiting and getting a quick moment to have maybe a close encounter, even if it's just to come up and have a whale blow in your face. We say then you've been kissed by that whale. But it really, I mean, if you're close enough to feel the blow, that's a pretty special moment, right? Or maybe you think of these being the breeding grounds. So maybe you're thinking about the mating and reproduction that's happening down there, the rolling around and other things appearing. I'm sure it's a family group, so we won't go into too much detail on their breeding, but we can answer those questions at any time too if you like. But what I thought I would do is take us back a few years and add another layer or two to highlight really how fortunate we are to still be able to experience this unique and magical place. I think it all starts with talking about this captain, this well-known captain, Captain Charles Melville Scammon. He was a whaling captain, but he was also, and kind of unusual for this time as a whaling captain, he was also a very observant with details in nature, and he was also an author and illustrator. And he did publish and ended up publishing this book, The Marine Mammals of the Northwestern Coast, and it really is um, a great book that was kind of one of the first descriptions of like gave us first illustrations of the bodies of these whales. And as a whaling captain, he had kind of access, and this was a lot of the ways that much of our information came from was from these whaling captains. Um, Captain Scammon he was really the first to hunt gray whales. We can say he discovered the lagoons, but of course, I don't think I'm sure Mexican locals or, whoever many years ago already knew that those lagoons existed. But he was the first whaling captain to discover these precious lagoons. And of course, he did it by following these whales during their migration while he was a whaling captain. And as a good whaling captain, he was, trying to survive, trying to make money, trying to support his family and the families of his crew. And so he did what he came to do, and he was very efficient at it. He definitely made an impact on the lagoons and on the number of whale species, or the whales in these lagoons. He definitely harvested many hundreds of, if not more, thousands of whales. And of course, that also opened the door to other whaling ships coming into these lagoons and harvesting these whales. But to get back to what other Scammon's other traits was the fact that he was such an astute naturalist and author. I do wanted to mention that one of the northernmost lagoons, Ojo de Liebre, is actually named Scammon's Lagoon, kind of the English, not the English version. Ojo de Liebre is the Eye of the Rabbit, but it's also referred to as Scammon's Lagoon as the lagoon that he had discovered. But he did fill up journals. He had his whaling log books and, the ship's logs, but he also had his own journals where he would sketch and he would take notes. This book itself is full of really interesting narratives, in some cases about whaling, but of course, how they were living, how they approached the whales, how they handled and how the whales interacted. I'll read you a quick excerpt here in just a moment. But he also could see, he was said to have foreshadowed the decline of marine mammals because of the whaling and harvesting industry, and because of the economic factors that were driving that industry. So he was very in tune with what was going on. Here's just some pages that were copied from his book. And like I said, he did provide us with a lot of these first full body illustrations, and he really looked at the detail as well. As a matter of fact, I love these illustrations of the whale lice and the barnacle. As a matter of fact, on the whale eye, really taking a close look at it. And here on the page, in the plate in this book with the gray whale is also the fin whale. But I wanted to read you this excerpt that I thought was kind of interesting, and I'm sure we've heard some of these nicknames, but he describes this as the habits of the gray whale have brought it many significant names, among which the most prominent are hardhead, mussel digger, devilfish, grayback, and ripsack. The first mentioned misnomer arose from the fact of the animals having a great propensity to root the boats when coming in contact with them, in the same manner that hogs upset their empty troughs. Moreover, they are known to descend to soft bottoms in search of food or for other purposes. And when returning to the surface, they've been seen with head and lips besmeared with the dark ooze from the depths below, hence the name of mussel digger. Devilfish is significant of the danger incurred in the pursuit of the animal. Grayback is indicative of its color, and ripsack originated in the manner of flensing. But devilfish is something interesting, and just to keep in mind as we move forward looking at these lagoons, that they were very, very protective and would fight back. They gave a very interesting fight, or very hearty fight back. As a matter of fact, it is an interesting read, especially in the California, well, he calls it the California gray whale section in his book. We call him now the Pacific gray whale. But he does go into detail on some instances of the gray whales fighting back. They would at times take the calf in order to get the mom to come over to the boat. And of course, the mom would then be definitely fighting back and aggressing towards the boats. Illustrated the various lagoons, and here referencing Magdalena Bay, which is at the southern tip of the Baja Peninsula. And you can see all the ships, but also all the whales, and then all the small whaling boats. And this map is an adaptation of his log entries and sketches. It was reproduced in a book called Men and Whales at Scammons Lagoon in 1972. And Henderson, the author, had actually pulled in some other additional information from other various sources to complete this map, but a lot of it indicates where Scammons traveled during his journeys, and you can see in the on the right-hand side where they highlight Scammons Lagoon and the various lagoons that he was stopping at along the way, even up into the Sea of Cortez on the mainland Mexico. But as I mentioned, he was very efficient. He was doing a great job. He really, he definitely was successful, as were all the whalers of these days. And while the true pre-whaling numbers aren't known of gray whales, we do know that the end result was pretty devastating. The estimates, with some estimates as low as about 1,000 to maybe even 2,500 gray whales left in the entire population when this whaling period ended in the late 1800s. So these estimates are actually kind of from the 1930s, early getting into the 1940s, when we started to see protection, fortunately. So people started to take notice of the whales, not just the income and the economics of whaling, but then also looking at the whales and the populations and where they were going to these lagoons, and there weren't as many whales anymore. So it wasn't even necessarily worth it to go to the lagoons, but it did raise awareness enough that people started to look at this as something maybe we should be protecting these whales, not just worrying about whether or not we should be taking making the effort to go to the lagoons, but what do we do to recover these whale populations? And at the time, the interest was probably, we want to rebuild the population so that we can resume hunting. But fortunately, that's not how it ended up evolving. But beginning in the 1930s, the gray whales were protected under a commercial hunting ban that was adopted by the League of Nations. So we did start to see that protection put into place, which was great. And in the 1940s, then we saw the International Whaling Commission actually put protections in place specifically for gray whales. The ban on gray whales was actually the first international agreement to protect a whale species from commercial whaling operations. So, maybe they had to have that purpose in this world to be able to raise that awareness in a population that could be seen, had such access to be able to be seen, where other populations tend to be a little further offshore and not so coastal. So the IWC did enforce the ban on commercial hunting of the gray whales, like I said, and shortly after the International Convention for the Regulation of Whaling was established. Now, if we jumped ahead and looked at a more recent timeline, here from the 60s now to almost current times, you can see that the population has rebounded quite a bit, with some drops, some ups and downs here throughout. It's very common as a population increases, you'll see some drops and some increases. But you'll notice a couple of steep declines in the 80s and then again in the late 90s, where we had large El Niños that were assumed to have really impacted the population. And of course, now if you look at the very right of the screen, we've seen a huge decline that we are unfortunately encountering now. This decline has, we saw a slight increase in 2024. As a matter of fact, in 2023, 2024, so they had declared I'm sorry, I jumped ahead. In 2019, NOAA had declared a unusual mortality event. This is when they are able to allocate federal funding and allocate federal resources. I know some of you guys are involved with Stranding Network, so you're probably very familiar, but for all of those that might not be, this allows the US federal government to allocate funding. Now, this was a multinational, this is a whale that covers multinational lines, and it was awareness in multinational efforts with monitoring going on in Mexico, Canada, and in the US. And they saw such steep declines overall that they were able to declare an unusual mortality event so that funding could be established and they could start to look at a specific cause and potential reasoning behind it. Fortunately, we did start to see an increase in those numbers. And so the unusual mortality event, or the UME, was closed, considered okay. The gray whales are recovering again. But then the very next year, last year's numbers were another big steep decline overall, both all in the lagoons. I'm sure Lisa will talk about it next week. Up and down the coast, very, very low numbers throughout the range in the areas where census and numbers are kept. I just want to touch really quickly on what caused that. While we know that gray whales are bottom feeders, as Scammon had mentioned, they're mussel diggers, but they are the only whale that will get its prey from down in the mud by opening its mouth on the ocean floor, sucking up a pit of mud, and then filtering out the water and sand, collecting only what is in the what is in the mud. So they primarily eat gammarid amphipods, but of course they can't be very, very selective when they're just sucking up a big pit of mud. So they're going to eat anything in there. And they're also very adaptive and eat a variety of prey up in their northern range. But this is their primary method and preferred method from what we know. And so they are bottom feeders, but they rely on sea ice formation up in the Arctic Ocean. And the algae that grows on the bottom of the sea ice is what actually helps to really start that food chain in that area. When the algae grows, it attracts a variety of plankton in and of itself, but then also when the ice melts and that algae is released and it falls to the ocean floor, that helps to produce a very, very rich habitat and allow those gammarid amphipods to get big and fat and be able to sustain these gray whale prey. So you can see here as the ice melts, then the algae will fall to the floor, of course, starting that food chain. But what happened? Well, in 2014 till about 2019, we had this big, large, warm water mass nicknamed the blob that really just kind of moved in and settled, and it didn't really move around. It didn't disperse. It didn't break up like we would normally expect it to. And that really impacted the prey availability, the ice formation, primarily ice formation, and then thereby the prey availability for gray whales during this very, very long period of time. And over that time, we slowly started to see more and more gray whales stranding. And as Stranding Network started taking all their sampling, we started to notice that most of them were emaciated. Many surveys here, including this one from gray whale research in Mexico, where they took aerial shots for photogrammetry. You can see the 2017 far left image of a normal robust whale, this whale being Escherichthys robustus. It should be nice and robust, right? And as we started to see the onset of that UME, we saw skinnier and skinnier whales in many cases where you would see the scapula. Whoops, I moved just looking for my laser pointer, you would see the scapula in this area. I mean, in these areas, you can see the scapula showing. It's in the back of the skull, and of course, really, really skinny whales. So we are hopefully seeing. We are definitely seeming to see more whales this year, but it will be interesting to see what NOAA's surveys are recording and reporting and how that plays into our overall population. Hopefully we'll see another incline after we saw that up and then small down again, but maybe we'll be on the upward motion. But we're hoping this UME is, I mean, it's closed officially, but we're hoping it's actually truly over. So I wanted to show you these. I think these are really, really interesting. This is a map. It should be a video map. It's a video map, and it's is showing tagging data from three, I say three, three different whales that were tagged. These are from Oregon State University. And they put satellite tags on these whales, and we can watch their tracks. Let me get my cursor back here. And so you can see each one denoted by its color, but it does shows over a period of time moving up if they're feeding, and these whales happen to be feeding. These are, you can see the note PCFG gray whale tracks. Those are Pacific Coast Feeding Group whales that tend to stay in and around the Pacific Northwest to feed, but I really wanted to highlight this portion here where they're down in the lagoon complexes, and notice that, and I'll take this back here and we'll look at it again really quickly, but notice how the whales, they're not just going to one lagoon and then back it up here and take another look. And then going back north, let's watch the orange one. It goes into Ojo de Liebre. Then the blue one stops there and then goes down to San Ignacio and then back up to Ojo and then back down to San Ignacio and then back to Ojo and then back up, where the green one then also went from Ojo de Liebre down to San Ignacio. And then the orange one went past it. So they do move around within that lagoon, the various lagoons, and the lagoon complexes with the three main lagoons. I think it's really interesting and just something to keep in mind when we look at the census data later from each of these lagoons. We have to keep in mind that those whales aren't just there and staying, but they do tend to move around and even return back to other lagoons. And here was this was another interesting interactive that Oregon State created. Now, this is not individual whales. These are not an actual tag, but this is an accumulation of data that then they put together so that we could see the general overall flow. And what you're going to see is a pregnant female traveling south. And then you're going to have a calf pop up and be represented. And you'll see the calf traveling alongside. And then you'll also see the male coming in behind. They'll be down in the lagoons, and then you're going to see them journey north. You'll be able to see when the mother and the calf split. So it gives you an idea of how long they're staying together and their movements as individual different species, sexes. All right. So you can see the female with the male coming in behind. And now we have a calf alongside, and then they're in the lagoons. And then the males are the first to leave the lagoons, with the mothers and calves leaving the lagoons last, usually staying longer, feeding, getting those calves nice and fat. And then once they get up into the feeding grounds, usually it's not too long before the mother and calf will split. The calf goes on its separate way. They don't stay together much beyond that. Tend to stay together in total 6 to 9 months. And once they get into their primary feeding grounds, then they, like I said, they will split and go on their way. My husband Bernardo worked at a whale research camp on Vancouver Island in the Tofino area. And during the summer, it was really interesting. He'd watch these whales come in, and he several times saw cow-calf pairs together. And then they noticed that after a week or so, they weren't together any longer. It was kind of an interesting timeline to be able to see that in real time happening. So let's make our way south and look at those lagoons in more detail. The primary lagoons being the northernmost lagoon of Ojo de Liebre. There's actually two lagoons here, and at one time it was actually three lagoons, but there's a large sandbar that shifts around right in front of all three of these lagoons. It has closed off the northernmost lagoon, and I believe access to Guerrero Negro isn't fully as open as it used to be either. Now, the town that is nearby here is Guerrero Negro, and that's what you'll hear often referred to. But the largest part, this largest lagoon here, is Ojo de Liebre, and there are many different ways of accessing it. You can drive down usually and stay in Guerrero Negro and go out with day trips, or there's several different camps that you can fly down, and they stay in some of these outer parts of the lagoon to go whale watching. So they actually have a large enough lagoon that they watch in different areas. The middle lagoon is San Ignacio. This one has nothing developed around it. There's no town. There's no real easy access. There's about 45 miles inland is the town of San Ignacio. The drive out from San Ignacio is a bit of a bumpy and graded road, but it's a really neat place and it's beautiful to drive to. The town of San Ignacio is an oasis, and it's really gorgeous, and it's a nice drive. But you can also fly down, so you can drive down or fly down to these camps, or this is the one lagoon that you can go to and actually anchor in the middle of the lagoon if you go on a boat with a permit. There's 4 US boats that have permits to go down to these lagoons. Only 2 of which I believe are active right now, Searcher Natural History Tours and the Royal Polaris, which is we charter once a year. And we have permission and we get to anchor right in the main whale watching area and enjoy whale watching 24/7. If you've seen whales by moonlight coming up right alongside your boat, that's really something to experience. But this is a really special area because it is so pristine and undeveloped and untouched. All of the camps that are built up on the coastlines the coastlines of the lagoon have to tear down and kind of leave no trace when they do leave at the end of the season. And then the furthest south here is Magdalena Bay, and this is also broken up into, I believe, 3 different primary whale watching areas. And I haven't been actually to this one. I have been to the other 2 several times, but I haven't been to the further south one. But that is also easily accessible from La Paz, where you can do day trips from La Paz over there, or you can go down directly to Magdalena Bay. The northernmost 2 lagoons are in a biosphere reserve. The Vizcaíno biosphere is an area of protection. It's basically a national park that encompasses both San Ignacio and Ojo de Liebre. And this really gives a lot, as you can imagine, with national parks, it gives a lot of protection to these lagoon areas, this entire lagoon complex. The whale sanctuaries were declared, not this biosphere reserve, but just as a sanctuary for whales was declared in 1972, which is about the earliest that these areas were recognized to have these whales that were friendly and interacting and starting to recover from those whaling. We saw those whaling numbers, and this is the area that these whales were hunted, but they were recovering enough and already seeing, and actually way before major tourism was starting to happen, but in the late 60s and early 70s, people from UC San Diego and San Diego State University were recognizing the gray whale migration and making their way down to the lagoons and visiting, and even recognizing that there was value to potentially do gray whale research in these areas. And in 1972, Ray Gilmore had gone down for one of the first times. And in 1976, he reported that he had a friendly gray whale. And when word got out about that, there was a local fisherman, Pachico, who said, "No, you were not the first. You did not encounter the first." He says, "Yeah, I encountered the first friendly whale." He said in 1972, he had a whale that had circled around his boat so long and wouldn't leave him alone that he finally reached out and touched it. And he's definitely recognized as the first friendly encounter with a gray whale. Now imagine and remember that these whales were hunted, and they would defend their calves and protect them, and were known as devilfish. And beyond that too, this is a big area of fishing. A lot of small boat fisheries will happen in this area, small artisanal fishing. And these fishermen, when they went out in the lagoons to go fishing, they would have to kind of dodge around the whales, or the whales would surface, and they would hit the boat, hit whales. So they were always really careful and avoided the whales. And they had these rumors of being somewhat aggressive. So they really just did everything to avoid whales. And Pachico even said that he would, when he saw whales and they would circle the boat, he would usually start his engine and move away from them. But in this case, he had moved and the whale kind of followed after him. And eventually he just, like, the whale just keeps coming back and it's just sticking its head up. It's just right there. So he just reached out and pet it. And I was reading an account by Dr. Jim Sumich, who later said, who knows, maybe these whales always were friendly, but we didn't give them a chance to be, right? So we were hunting them, and, we were hunting them, or we were fishing and avoiding them, but maybe it just took us reaching out to experience that. Maybe they've always been the friendly whales. So going back to our biosphere reserve, this is also really protects a whole lot in the area. It's not just because of the whales, even though, that's where a lot touches many people. It's a very, very rich area. These areas, San Ignacio Lagoon has the northernmost range of mangrove systems in the world. Mangroves are more of a tropical species and found in tropical habitats, but there's a very rich and developed mangrove system there. There's wildlife and birds. There's definitely endemics in the area of a varieties of types. In 1993, this area was described as declared, a UNESCO World Heritage Site as well. So it's definitely recognized worldwide as having cultural and natural value. So here's the borders and boundaries of the biosphere reserve around the northernmost lagoon, Ojo de Liebre, and here it is around San Ignacio Lagoon. And again, it's not, it is because of the whales, and it's not because of the whales. It is a whale sanctuary, and that is a primary reason why it got why it was declared the whale sanctuary area or the World Heritage Sites, but it's definitely rich for so many reasons. But of course, the mothers and calves appreciate the protections. These mothers will come into these shallow habitats where there are fewer predators. Again, there's sandbars out in front of the majority of these lagoons. You can't really get access, and neither can predators. So the mothers and calves can kind of relax a little bit. There are strong currents, so they do have to continue swimming, but that probably helps build that calf up nice and strong. It's also, it's a shallow lagoon. It probably has some element of evaporation where it may be a higher salinity, although because of the tidal change, I think there's probably a lot of refreshing and replenishing of that water in there. But you do see these animals that are curious, and I do my best not to anthropomorphize it. I have, as Kat mentioned, I've been down about 28 times now, and you want to look at it and say, oh, no, I'm not going to say they're having fun or they're looking for attention, but there's so many ways that it's hard to describe it in any other terms. These whales come to you on their own terms, I'm sorry. This is amazingly managed area where the fishing captains have formed a cooperative. They basically manage the area. They get together at least once a year. They get together at the end of the season and assess what went well, what didn't work, what did work, how things were managed overall. And they have very strict rules, and they have an oversight who's in the area watching them. All the boats are GPS tagged, so they can monitor the second they enter the whale watching zones, how long they're with whales. They have to share the whales. They can only be like 3 boats with a whale at any one time, and they can only spend a certain amount of time with a whale before they have to pass it off to another boat. And total boats can only be with that particular whale for any certain amount of time. It's very, very well regulated. I think it should be a model for a lot of areas. A migratory whale watching is a lot different, right? These whales aren't staying in one area for a very long time. They're traveling past, so they're going to move past probably faster than we would. We might be able to we wouldn't be able to congregate around them in the same way. But what these captains will do is position themselves nearby the whale. You can't cut them off. You can't get in front of a whale, and really, it's up to the whale to come to you, not to you. You can't force yourself on the whale. The not only the rules, but it just doesn't. I you can't. The whales can swim away, and I've seen plenty of whales swim away, not because we were encroaching on them too closely, but because they kind of maybe got startled, or they just decided no, or they passed right by a boat without caring at all. But with a little splash, you might get a whale to come up and play and open its mouth. You often will have this feeling of them looking you directly in the eye. Here you can see those little whiskers that they have. And you will definitely see lots of behaviors. There's a lot of spy hopping that goes on in the lagoons, especially during like a high tide change where they are kind of riding those tidal currents. It's a very interesting. And sometimes you'll even see them playing with the mud on the floor of the lagoons where they're filtering it out, calves and adults alike. There's been lots of sampling done, and there's very little prey in the lagoon, so they're not really feeding to forage and get fat, but they might be looking for a little snack or even learning a little bit. I have more and can go on, but I see what time it is, and I wanted to go ahead and see what kind of questions we had, Kat.
All right, we got lots of questions. Look at that. I bet there's even more on the chat. Chat, please go ahead and put your questions in the thing, and let's get started. So yes, what's your question? And I'm going to I'm going to repeat so that the Zoom people can all hear.
I would like to know what your theory is about why the whales like to be pet.
Diane, what's your theory about why the whales like to be pet and
By humans?
by humans?
It's very interesting, and I don't know. We'll never know. But have you? I know Kat's a dog person. I'm a dog person, and many of you might be as well. And many of you have probably pet your dog, pet your cat, and you feel them push against you in that way. I've seen them whales do that. I've felt them push up against us, in response to the petting. A part of me thinks it must feel good, but of course they could rub on the ocean floor, or I mean, I've seen them rubbing on boats. They definitely rub on our Royal Polaris. It's anchored in the lagoon. They rub on the anchor chain. So there's probably some element of it that just feels good, but we definitely get some play. This whale calf would come over to the boat, and it kept rolling up where its face on the side. And when you would scratch the line of its mouth, it would open its mouth, and you could actually rub your hands on its baleen and tongue. I don't know. I can't answer for that. It's very interesting, but it definitely, and we've seen many times, and we describe it in a way, but I've seen it. I've seen it with my own eyes, and I've tried to be as non-biased, non-putting any thought and assigning any emotion to it. But I've seen a mother push her whale up against her calf towards the ponga, and then kind of just drift off in the background. And you kind of have to think, well, what is it like? I need a nap. Here, be the babysitter. We say that jokingly, but it's hard to say exactly, but these are just accounts that I've seen over and over and over. Of course, I've also seen the mother squeeze in between the calf and the panga and like insist on getting pet themselves. So
Okay, I'm going to go back and forth between online and here. So why do the males make the journey to the bays in Baja?
oh, for mating. Yeah, it's definitely a mating ground. The females are in estrus twice from what we can detect in science. In November during the migration, where they will mate during that journey, and then again in February when they're in the lagoons, typically, right? A broad stroke typically. And they have a gestation period of 11 to 13 months. So those would both align with them giving birth either along the migration or down in the lagoon area. That's definitely why. Why the juveniles come down, we're not really sure. Probably because their instinct tells them to, and they're getting some practice or something.
Okay, let's see. So Mark and then Sheila's after that.
I always imagined the whales were in the Gulf of California, that they're in lagoons along the Pacific. Do they get up into the Gulf of California at all?
So the question is, do the whales ever get into the Gulf of California, or are they only in the lagoons in the Pacific?
Excellent question. And after last year, we have just really concrete evidence to in a cold water year, the whales go further south looking for warmer lagoon areas. So the northernmost lagoons were virtually empty, and the whales were down in Puerto Vallarta, off of Cabo, up in La Paz, up even a little further north into the Gulf. And history shows us that they had been, through Stammen's records, if we reflect back to that map, that they were even on the mainland Mexico in lagoons.
Okay, Sheila.
Given how bad the calving numbers were last year, is there any early data on calving this year?
Given how bad the calving data was last year, how is the calving data? Is there any indicator for the calving data this year?
We are definitely seeing more calves. And so here is a couple of slides, and I can keep answering questions, but you can see that we had, I have a series. Every week they do a survey in all of the lagoons. So this is offered through the Reserva de la Biosfera El Vizcaíno. So you can follow them on social media and get these weekly updates. And if you notice this, they had 13 cow-calf pairs. This was in January, late January. This is early February. Now they had 26 cow-calf pairs, growing up to 72 cow-calf pairs and 107 cow-calf pairs. This latest one, end of February, still the numbers went down a little, 78. But remember, those whales could have gone down to other lagoons. And 92 cow-calf pairs in the most recent. These are definitely numbers that were much higher than last year. And here are current survey numbers from gray whale research in Mexico. They do weekly surveys from both San Ignacio Lagoon and the furthest south Magdalena Bay complex. And you can follow them on social media or their website, and you can see now the calves recently in Magdalena Bay, they have 0, but these numbers have been steady in San Ignacio Lagoon.
And so with all of your years of experience going down there, 28 visits total, and we know that there's been all of these unusual mortality events, like how does this pencil out compared to other years when you look at it over the past 15, 20 years that you've been going down there?
In hindsight, it is detectable down in the lagoons. Before, it was really noticeable as an overall overarching UME. We definitely saw fewer whales and fewer interactions and fewer calves in the mid 20 teens, right? 2017, 2018, it was definitely getting a little sparser. Now, for experience, I always say it's quality over quantity. I don't need a lot of whales to have a really good time, but we definitely can see the difference. And just looking around, when you come into the lagoon, the first morning of our trip, we're arriving in San Ignacio Lagoon, and usually we could look out and just see whale blows in every direction, just like popping up everywhere like popcorn. And then there's years where it's just a little less. We've had great experiences every year so far since, but it's definitely different.
All right. An online question. Let's see. My 9-year-old wants to know, where on their journey do they mate? Did you say at the lagoons in Baja? Oh, you got any Pink Floyd pictures for us there, Diane?
I did skip over it, but I do. Yeah, there's mating gray whales. Um, so they will attempt these copulation events in many times, but the females are in estrus reportedly in November and in February. So that's when they may be actually reproducing. Now, we might still have some active males attempting that. This occurred along the coast between Ensenada and about a quarter way down the Baja Peninsula when I encountered this trio of whales that were circling around and having a little frenzy. They do also, we see lots of mating behavior in the lagoons as well, especially in February. You don't see it as much later on. Typically the males have left and it's just cow-calf pairs.
Okay, any questions from the audience? Oh, lots of questions. Peggy.
I was just curious, these numbers you're quoting are relatively small, there's thousands of whales. So what are those guys doing?
Okay, so Peggy's question is, these numbers are relatively small and there's thousands of whales. So what are those guys doing? Meaning the ones that are not in the lagoon?
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting. You know, in the peak years where the gray whales, since the gray whale overall population in 2017 was at 27,000 whales. And during those times, you would see something upwards to 3,000 whales in Ojo de Liebre. And remember, there's whales kind of moving around to different lagoons, but they are doing a census in all of the lagoons. So they have an accumulated number. But there are whales that are juveniles, or maybe the females that aren't in a reproductive stage. They will give birth one year and then they skip the next season, and then they at most will give birth the next year, if not waiting 3 years. And they may just be part of this Pacific Coast feeding group where they're staying someplace up in and along the coastline and not necessarily coming all the way down, staying to feed. Of course, they're not staying in the Arctic because because of the ice cover, but there's a lot of area in the Bering Sea and then even along the Pacific Northwest where they may be feeding.
All right, we have time for one more question. I saw your hand go up there.
Yeah, so San Ignacio got a reputation of being the place where the friendly whales were. But if the whales are moving around from different bays, is there a difference in their behavior between the different bays?
Okay, and so the question is, San Ignacio has a reputation for being the place where the friendly whales are, but there are other bays as well where whales are going and being friendly. And so do the whales move around from different places? Did I get that question right, or not quite?
Behavior patterns.
Thank you.
bays.
Is there different behavior pattern in different bays? And I want to tack on to that. Why do you think whales are friendly in the lagoons down there and they're not up here asking for pets and kisses?
All very good questions, and I'll try to go quick because I know we're at the end of our hour. But so we do see the same behaviors and the same interactions and the same friendliness in the different lagoons. You definitely see it in Ojo de Liebre, you see it in San Ignacio, and down in Magdalena Bay. Active tourism in all of those locations. You can definitely have excellent encounters in all of them. We go to San Ignacio because we can pull our large vessel in there, and you can't do that in the other lagoons. I like San Ignacio with its pristine background, but they all have a lot of strong attributes. I think you can't go wrong in any of the lagoons that you go to. And interestingly enough, about them, are they, why not anywhere else? Well, it's against the law anywhere else. So I think hopefully responsible boaters are putting it into neutral if a whale comes in very close, which that will happen. We do have it. We have it happen and more frequently. Now more boaters on, I think, on the water, and we're definitely, you know, we have some good weather conditions, definitely have a lot to do with it. And we'll have boat whales come up to boats in Southern California, Central California. And I think it's just up to a responsible boater not to interact with the whale in that way and just enjoy it coming up close and taking a look and then letting it move on. For risk, we don't want to, you know, get those whales acclimated to that. There's also discussion about the resumption of the native whaling with with the macaw being wanting to resume their whaling rights. And, you know, if they're going to go out in small boats, it's often been a concern if that, you know, how that it might influence those whales coming up to small boats up there. But it's against the law anywhere else. So I think that's the most important thing to keep in mind is that could probably be a really hefty fine if you got caught doing something like that.
So how do we go whale watching with you on your boat out into the middle of the lagoon? Don't you guys want to know how we can go and hang out in Baja with Diane?
I know what a poor promotional thing here. I was supposed to end with this slide, and I forgot to add it on there because I was just so engaged with other things at the moment. But the Cabrillo Marine Aquarium does a trip every single year, and we will be opening our reservations in May, on May 1st. And our trip is a 9-day trip. We stop at lagoons. We stop at 3 lagoons during our journey. And I'm trying to think, I think if I can get this open and shared, but it's just, we always go in March. It's usually the first week of March. And yeah, we stop at these different lagoons, or these different islands, and we go hiking, and we are on the boat for 9 days. We anchor right in the middle of the lagoon. You can see that big, beautiful boat. She's a 113-foot long-range fishing boat that we stay on the entire time. She's the 3rd largest in the long-range fishing fleet, and just really, really comfortable and accommodating for us. So yeah, call me here at the Cabrillo Marine Aquarium, or give
All
me
right, so
yeah.
May 1st it opens up. We
Yep.
will spread the word and see what we can do to get our community down there. And
Excellent.
maybe we'll see a bunch of Noyo people joining up and
That would be fun.
heading
Get a
down with
group.
you next year, May
Yeah.
1st.
Yeah.
All right, sounds good. Well, so that wraps up our hour together. So we're gonna leave you wanting more. Thanks everybody so much. It was really fun having you here. I like this viewing party thing. It's really fun to see people that I've never seen before at Noyo coming into our Zoom. Hi, everybody in Cabrillo Aquarium. I'll see you down there in a month, and thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. I hope to get up to Noyo soon. Thanks, Kat.